Are there any other votes? Announce the results.
Ayes 101, noes 0.
The bill is passed. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing a brief interruption for the purposes of a very special introduction. As was noted earlier by our friend and colleague, Mr. Kearns, we have in the chambers a number of guests today, most notably Linda Herbert, whose husband Don, as Mr. Kearns indicated, was lost to us a little more than 20 years ago after having been in a vegetative state for a number of years, awakened, and then we lost him, unfortunately, in 1995, I believe. Mr. Herbert's wife, Linda, is here. She's joined by her sister, Debbie Corbett, her nieces and nephews, Claire Corbett, Liam Blake, and Ryan Blake. We're delighted to have them in the chambers as guests of Mr. Kearns. If you please extend the warm cordialities of the House to this group.
Certainly, on behalf of Mr. Kearns, the Speaker, and all the members, we welcome this extraordinary family here to the New York State Assembly. We extend to you the privileges of the floor. We extend to you our admiration and respect for all that you have been through and for the dedication that your family has shown to this community. Thank you so very much. Always know that you're welcome here. Always know that we will send our love with you. Thank you so very much. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, members have on their desks an A calendar. I now move to advance the A calendar.
On Mr. Morelli's motion, the A calendar is advanced. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if we could go to that A calendar on page 3 and begin with Rules Report number 5 by Mr. Morelli.
Clerk will read.
Assembly 2604C, Rules Report Number 5. Mr. Morelli, an act to amend the general business law.
On a motion by Mr. Morelli, the Senate bill is before the House. The Senate bill is advanced. Mrs. Jaffe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think it's a surprise to everyone here that I strongly oppose this legislation of New York lifting the ban on professional human cage fighting and, in effect, sanctioning violence for profit. Cage fighting, also known as MMA, has no place in a civilized society. It is a spectacle of violence. Except for those who stand to profit from this barbaric entertainment masquerading as a sport, cage fighting causes great harm. It harms the fighters who risk their very lives and are often maimed or sometimes killed. Despite claimed efforts to clean up and regulate MMA, the fact is it continues to expose fighters to serious injury. MMA competitors are subjected to repeated blows from punches, kicks, and knees directly to the head, as well as chokeholds, rendering them helpless and often brain damaged. It harms women who are victimized by the glorification of distorted masculinity that cage fighting represents. It harms impressionable children as well as young people who are taught to believe that human brutality is a spectator sport. I believe that the economic advantage is significantly overstated. Consider the cost of the medical treatment and the care for the injured and disabled fighters, perhaps litigation from the fighters as well. Most importantly, the violent nature of this sport, so-called sport, is antithetical to the anti-violence message we are trying to deliver. to our children and our communities. New York should continue to ban mixed martial arts. And at the very least, we're going to move forward. We should, impose a moratorium for several years until maybe the Department of Health would conduct a comprehensive health study to determine the dangers of mixed martial arts. At this point, I will be voting no, and I encourage my colleagues to do so as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to be heard on the bill before the House. The question before the House today is not whether you like mixed martial arts, are a fan of boxing, or are generally a sports enthusiast. The question is whether combative sports will be regulated in New York State and whether we can provide an environment where those who choose to participate are as well protected as we can possibly make them. Boxing, single discipline martial arts, and mixed martial arts are violent by their nature. So are football, hockey, basketball. In fact, most competitive sports, from pole vaulting to race car driving, carry a degree of risk and danger. It is the responsibility and duty of policymakers to create a framework where the risks are mitigated, and we empower regulators to ensure that that mitigation is maximized. That's what the bill before you is intended to do. The controversy, in a sense, around mixed martial arts in this state is around the violent nature of the sport. 20 years ago, I was opposed to legalizing MMA in New York. I've changed my views based on a number of facts, but most notably two things that I think are worth pointing out. First of all, the sport has evolved considerably in the last 2 decades. And the popularity of the sport requires that policymakers around the country and in New York recognize the growing demand and the inherent danger in not regulating the sport. What we seek to do here is to take the sport essentially out of the shadows in New York, where amateur competitions happen, although not under the eye of any regulator, not with any organized method of making certain that not only the regulatory environment but the health and safety of participants is well regarded or looked out for. It is incumbent upon us to set a framework for professional and amateur boxing, mixed martial arts, single discipline martial arts, professional wrestling, etc. That's where we currently are, and that's really the question before the House. And I just might say parenthetically, there are a number of things in New York which happen legally which I may not like, or which you might not like, Mr. Speaker, or any other member may not like. It's obviously ultimately the choice of an individual as to whether they participate, whether they observe, whether they are spectators of a sport or any other activity. But it would be wrong for us in a state where millions of people are not only fans, but millions of people watch every single day on television mixed martial arts, boxing, and other combative sports, to say to them that you can't do it in New York, and we will not protect people who are doing it, who do it from an amateur perspective instead of a professional perspective. We could go through the reasons in terms of tax policy and economic policy, et cetera, but for me, the underlying question is, how do we establish health and safety regulations that protect people who participate in this sport? That's why I think the bill is before the House. That's why I think it's imperative that we vote today and bring mixed martial arts into the professional and amateur ranks in a regulated and controlled way in New York State. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Morelli. Mr. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's interesting how people try to frame what the real question is and say it's not the sport itself, but it's protecting New Yorkers, protecting those who are involved in a sport such as this from each other and from harm. But it is about the sport in this case. I support football. I'm concerned about the concussions in football. I watch boxing. I literally watched Benny Kid Perrette kill, Emil Griffin kill Benny Kid Perrette in the ring. And that was a very, very painful thing to watch. Boxing was regulated. Boxing has protections in it. So does football. Now they're trying to protect and say you can't hit a person certain ways. But this one Throwing two people in a cage, firstly, as an African American, we've been in cages fighting on the plantations and other places, and people let bite off each other's ears and do all kinds of things until they regulated that and made it something different. But throwing two human beings in a cage, and you know how we used to say in our neighborhoods, you should have a fair fight. Even when the man is knocked down, when I grew up, you're supposed to step back, let him get up and let's start all over again. This one, you could pounce on him, beat his or her brains out while they're on the floor, choke him. You know how we feel about the chokehold in New York City? Put him in a chokehold, and then the ref has to be determining whether he got choked enough or she was choked enough. This one is not something we should legalize or regulate. It should be banned. This goes too far for your entertainment. This goes too far for you to try to make some tax-paying dollars. Remember, everything that we legalized didn't get better for us. Every time we find certain social illnesses or things that should be unacceptable, we think legalizing it and regulating it will make it better. No, that's not the case in all instances. And in this case, this thing goes too far. This is a sport that should be banned. We should not be allowing our young people to say, I'd like to grow up someday and be a mixed martial arts artist and get somebody on the floor and scratch, bite, whatever they could do, and choke and kick. And this is too barbaric, and it should remain banned.
Mr. Murray.
On the bill?
On the bill, Mr. Murray.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Speaker for allowing this bill to finally come to the floor for an up and down vote. There's been much support, and it's about time we got it to the floor so we can actually vote on this bill and discuss issues that have been brought up during debate. I especially want to thank the sponsor of the bill, who I think has done a tremendous job. If you notice, this is a C print. That means there's been some amendments made to it that shows that the sponsor of the bill has listened to many of the concerns, that there have been concerns brought forward. He's listened, and he's sat with the people involved and made changes that were necessary, changes that are good, that make this a better bill. Now, first, I have to say this. I've been watching mixed martial arts for a long time. I've yet to see anyone thrown into a cage. I've seen adults enter the cage to participate in something they've trained for years and years, to get into it and do a profession that they chose. These professionals have been doing this since they were young kids. And by the way, martial arts in itself, it does teach self-defense. It teaches discipline, which is why many karate classes and other martial arts have quite a few children in these classes. It teaches them the discipline that they need. So, as I said, I've yet to see anybody thrown into a cage. They've willingly gone in to participate in a sport that they love and that they've been training for and to participate in for years. But the sponsor brought up some very good points, and that was protections for the professional fighters. This bill covers that with health insurance and other aspects. Again, I heard about all the terrible injuries and how brutal it is. Here's another interesting fact. Do you realize there are more serious injuries in competitive cheerleading each year than there are in mixed martial arts? That's because these are very well-trained professionals. They know what they're doing. When you don't just end a bout in mixed martial arts with a knockout or someone beaten to a pulp, they have a thing you call tapping out. That's when you're submitted in maybe a rear naked chokehold or something like this, or some move like that, where the participants have an opportunity to say, I give, call uncle, you win, which is why the injuries are not as vast and as serious as they are in some other sports. But again, I get back to this bill in itself. What this bill also does is it puts protections in place for the amateur fighters as well, because right now, You've all probably seen the movie Fight Club. Well, sometimes things like this are happening because it's forced underground. There are no regulations. I recently went to a fight. It's an amateur fight put on by New York Fight Exchange. And let me say, they did a tremendous job because they had ringside doctors, ambulances on hand. But you know what? They didn't have to, because right now those regulations do not exist. So there are fights going on right now where these fighters are not protected. And passing this bill will change that. It will give them the protections that they need. We talk about training facilities in schools. This bill tackles that issue as well. These are going to have to be licensed facilities. There will have to be precautions taken place in these schools and in these training facilities to make sure these fighters are protected. So again, I have to say, I commend the sponsor for taking all of these considerations into account, working on this bill and making it the best bill possible. You notice I also didn't even bring up yet the economic impact. This will have a tremendous economic impact on the state of New York. There was a study done recently that revenue from holding just 2 fights, one in the Buffalo region, one in New York City, could raise as much as $23 million in tax revenue to the state. Recent revenue projections estimate annual revenue to the state of about $67 million. You see, when these events take place, these are big events. They bring fans from all over the world. And it's not just one night. These are usually a whole weekend. So the fans come in maybe on a Thursday or a Friday. They stay in hotels. They eat at restaurants. They go to local shops to buy souvenirs. Then they enjoy the fight over the weekend. Then they stay maybe an extra day and check out the wonderful things that we have throughout this great state. And they stay. And you know what? They might come back just for that. So the ancillary revenue that will be borne onto the state from this is tremendous as well. So all in all, I'd have to say the time has come. And again, I commend the Speaker. I commend the sponsor of this bill. Did a tremendous job in putting together the best bill possible. It is time to take the vote. It's time to pass this. It's time to legalize professional mixed martial arts in the state of New York. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Glick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield to a few questions?
Will you yield, Mr. Morelli?
Yes, of course.
Mr. Morelli yields.
Under this legislation, when can the first match take place in New York State?
Well, the law requires 120 days for the Department or the New York State Athletic Commission to promulgate rules. You'd have to license promoters, license participants, license all the trainers, et cetera. So not sooner than 120 days, and that would only be dependent upon the New York State Athletic Commission being able to have all those rules in place. If they did not, they obviously could not begin hosting competitions until such time that they finished.
UFC has announced an April 23rd match in the state of New York. Can that be held?
I'm not aware of what's being talked about, but I know this, that it would not be sanctioned under this law because I think it's not likely that within the next few weeks you would have all those regulations completed.
Thank you, Mr. Morelli.
That's not to say, I'm sorry, if I just might amend it, that's not to say currently, as long as it's not a professional competition, that it couldn't happen. I think that's the point of what I was trying to say, and others have said, that because right now, at the amateur level, it is unregulated. The question is whether or not, and I don't know about the specifics, but that could be undertaken in New York.
Will there be a public comment period regarding the regulations that the State Athletic Commission will be putting out?
Well, I would say that I'm not sure of that. It depends upon what existing rules there are that relate to the publishing of rules and regulations by the Athletic Commission. Whatever governs them currently would continue to govern them. There's no changes in the law relative to their procedures about the promulgation of rules and regulations.
Do we have any information? There's a great many regulations that are involved in terms of checking the venues, the mat, and so forth. do we have any indication from the State Athletic Commission that they have the resources to immediately respond to requests for those inspections?
I have not spoken directly with the State Athletic Commission, although I do note that in the submission by the governor and the executive budget proposal does incorporate this proposal. I expect that should the governor sign this bill, if it passed today, that the governor and the executive branch would make certain that there are resources necessary to allow the Athletic Commission to carry out their responsibilities.
Thank you. One last question. There have been a lot of estimates of revenue generated for the state. It's my understanding that the state would receive a sales tax on tickets of 8.5%. And so I'm wondering if there is going to be, that's just for the event. So so when we hear a $23 million estimate, that's a much broader thing, not regarding any particular individual event.
Well, I've heard a number of estimates. There are a number of ways in which the state will generate revenue. Promoters, there has to be, all the various participants have to be licensed in various forms. That will generate revenue, all to the general fund. I don't know the number, but obviously it will be an increase of revenue. I think, and I do want to make clear, and I appreciate the question, want to make a distinction between revenues to the state and localities by virtue of sales tax, the state by virtue of other fees and licenses. But I want to make sure there's a distinction between revenues to governments and economic activity, which we believe will also be as a result of these competitions. So restaurants, hotel, bed and motel taxes, et cetera, that will be generated as a result of the economic activity, some directly, some indirectly from these competitions.
Thank you, Mr. Morelli. One final question. There's a 3% tax, which I believe does go to the state, on the gross for broadcasting, digital streaming, but cannot exceed $50,000 for one event. So should there be an event, a major championship that generates a huge amount of interest, and with it a great deal of broadcast revenue, isn't the cap of $50,000 to the state actually underselling?
You're relating to the section that only relates to mixed martial arts?
I believe so.
Correct. It says, in no event shall such tax imposed pursuant to this paragraph exceed $50,000 for any match or exhibition. So that's correct, as it relates to gross receipts tax.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Morelli. On the bill.
On the bill, Ms. Glick.
I happen to be a very big sports fan, and I understand that people get hurt in the course of sporting activities. Although what we have seen recently, and just last week, the NFL, one of their higher-ranking individuals was asked in Congress specifically if there is a direct link between head injuries and cognitive disabilities. And the answer was yes. So I understand lots of states have had this in play for a long period of time, but we're at the point where we're learning so much more. The question is, do we willingly and knowingly go forward and say that it is appropriate to have professional matches, amateur matches that encourage young people to view this as a career path, to go forward and take the chance on long-term disability? Now, I spoke on a radio station the other day out of Utica. And when I looked on their website just to see what I was getting myself into, I assumed that they were calling me and that it would be, they had a different opinion. And I was happy to have the conversation with a very nice gentleman who was very respectful. But what I found really almost heartbreaking was what was on the website, which was a comment by a gentleman who is a trainer and has a gym. He's a trainer and manager. He said, the biggest thing for us is that our pros will make more money because they'll be ticket sellers now. Instead of having to travel 8 hours out of state to fight with no family or friends, they can fight here in New York and make more money. Oftentimes, fighters on a card make additional money by selling tickets to friends and family for the events. He went on to say that many times the travel expenses are more than what they would make from winning their fight, so the ticket sales are important. I personally found that very painful to read, that youngsters who may think that this is a way to gain notoriety, a way for fame and fortune, because we are a celebrity culture, and this is something that can elevate them, because we see sports figures have really, in my humble opinion, an outsized influence in our society. And I believe it's part of the dumbing down of America that celebrities have now become, as opposed to perhaps philosophers, have become the people to whom we look forward to for their wisdom and their knowledge. And yet here, these young people will be not only training for a fight, but trying to sell tickets so that they can make some extra money. In the bill, there is, and this is perhaps one of the improvements that one of my colleagues referred to, there's $50,000 for injuries, an insurance policy that covers injuries. There's also a $50,000 death benefit to your family. And there's $1 million policy if one sustains life-threatening brain injury. Now, I'm not sure if that means that that's payable if you're in a coma and need to be cared for on life support, although we have had the debate just yesterday that when it comes to insurance, when it comes to property damage, many ways that the insurance industry finds a way not to necessarily pay out on a claim. But I'm not sure what if your life isn't threatened because you're still able to walk around, but you don't know where you are or who your family members are. Are you still eligible for those compensations? Was not clear in the bill or in the memo that was attended to it. And in an article that actually was in favor of lifting the ban, this was a doctor from Santa Barbara, a physician with expertise in sports medicine, said the risks of MMA injuries are going to be higher than football or even boxing because MMA is a more violent sport and will have a higher rate of injuries and based on repetition. Another physician, an orthopedist, said that there's a unique constellation of possible injuries, and when compared to football, the velocity at which people hit each other is less in MMA, but it is more repeated. And that many of the moves are made with specific intention of bending a joint in the wrong direction. But the writer goes on to say that for reasons that no one can truly account for, human beings, being what we are, actually like to see each other knock each other down. And a 19-year-old was quoted saying, I just like the sport. When asked what he likes about it, MMA rather than boxing. He said, because I like kicking people, punching, and slamming them. That's pretty much it. Well, that's 19 years old. I mean, kids do like that. Nothing in this bill will stop kids from getting into fight clubs. There's nothing here that is going to reduce violence. We spend all of this time talking about how we have to stop bullying in schools, how we have to make certain that young people understand that violence isn't the answer to solving their problems. And then we also tell kids, if you can go out into the schoolyard and you want to be a star in basketball, go out and practice. Shoot hoops. You got to shoot hoops. People who, there are championships won on the fact that you are a consistent foul shooter. So kids will go out and they'll practice and practice. Now we're saying there's a career path. What's to say that some kid isn't going to say, you know what, I'm going to start practicing in the schoolyard, and I'm going to start seeing how good I am. And not with some poor soul who doesn't know what they're getting into, but a couple of friends. A couple of friends saying, maybe somebody will see us do this. Kids, we're the adults. We should be making certain that kids do not get the misimpression that New York State thinks this is a good idea. We have a responsibility. And if, for instance, that $1 million policy for the life-threatening brain injury that's not clear, what happens to those individuals who will have a result after years and years? I mean, when I was a kid, boxing was popular, and we knew that somebody could be punch drunk. Now we know what that means. We didn't know then. We knew something was wrong because the guy was dopey, and he was just a regular palooka, I believe was the expression, with a cauliflower ear. So clearly we knew that something was going on. Now we know. Now we know. And the gentleman with whom I spoke on the radio when we had the conversation, he said, yeah, I was coming through the Atlanta airport, and I saw Muhammad Ali, who was a real hero when I was a kid. And it's really kind of hard to think that maybe whatever this is, the Parkinson's disease or whatever, maybe it's hard to believe that that was not contributed to by